Me today. I'm Emma Horrell. I'm the User Experience Manager at Edinburgh University. And today, as Jana said, I'm going to... Oh, I can hear some background right there. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to share with you my experiences of working with editors during an upgrade of our Drupal content management system and talk about a piece of work that I kicked off to adopt principles from co-design towards shaping our CMS for better content design and user experience improvement. So this was a talk I delivered, as Jana said, at the DrupalCon conference in Prague last year, hence the slide deck. The upgrade of our CMS is an ongoing process, and this talk really covers the initial portion of that process, and it was the start of the journey that we're on and we continue to be on. So here is my schedule for what I'm going to cover with you today. I'll start with some background and some context, and then get into the main part about how to get closer to a CMS that supports editors as they want to create content and in their content creation tasks. So I'm going to break this down into reimagining your CMS and the way that editors interact with it, working with editors to learn what they really want, talk about how you can fold this knowledge into ongoing development and make decisions about the iteration of your CMS. And then I'm going to finish with some reflections on aligning UX and agile working practices to achieve some of these things. So as I go through my talk today, I will refer briefly to some resources and concepts that have helped me to learn about these things so I can talk about them. Due to the time we have, I won't have time to go into much in detail, but I have a resources slide at the end if you're interested in following anything up. Okay, a bit about me, where I work and what I do. My background is in content design. I'm currently a student on a program about service management and design, so I'm learning about that, and I really enjoy thinking in systems. So I'm in my happy place with the work I do with a CMS at Edinburgh University. My role is based in the Central Information Services Department, and we serve the whole university. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with Edinburgh University, but we've been around a while. We have a heritage going back to the 16th century. These days, we have approximately 45,000 students, about 15,000 staff, divided across different subject departments that we refer to as colleges and schools. And we also have professional services as well. And we have a devolved publishing model. So when we began to upgrade our CMS based in Drupal from the version we were on, which was 7, to the current version, we wanted to bring our editors with us on this journey. We have editors across the whole university with a range of skills and knowledge in content design, but we have one central CMS. So we saw an opportunity here to try and improve the editorial experience of the CMS, because we recognize that will result in better content design across the web estate. So on the web estate, this picture gives you an idea of what it looks like, maybe, and how it operates in total. This slide's from last year, so it's maybe slightly less than 8 million pages. We had a big drive to delete content ahead of our migration. So about 8 million pages divided across several hundred sites. So each of those schools and colleges I mentioned would have its own site, its own look and feel, its own audiences. And they vary, right, in size and complexity and identity. And with the devolved publishing model, we'll have several hundred editors all using the central CMS to get their content out there to those different audiences. So our editors are the subject matter experts of that content and the audiences. So whether those audiences are prospective undergraduates wanting to study medicine or scholars in Asian studies, our editors have that specialist knowledge of the content, and it's our job as a central IT team to support them with a CMS to meet their needs. So to think a bit more about the CMS and editors, so I've chosen a sort of typical systems graphic to illustrate how editors interact with the interface of our CMS. So it's quite linear. So they use a CMS, they typically put content in, text, images, and so on, and get web pages out. And how we as the IT team have traditionally worked with editors is also quite linear. So we develop the CMS, we as in the IT team, service management team, hand them a training course, which is self-serve. We train them again in content design, which is also self-serve course. And we rely on them raising queries with our support team if they get stuck and they want to do something that they can't do. And when I did, as the UX lead on this project, when I did some initial discovery research for the upgrade, and I spent some time listening to editors and understanding what their experiences were like, I found stuff like this. They were saying things like, the system's really hard to use, there's a lot to remember, the system won't let me do this, the system wants me to do this. And they were quite pleased, actually, if they found a hack or a workaround to the system, because they felt they'd kind of got some control over it. And all these comments indicated to me that that's exactly how the editors were feeling. They felt that they didn't have much control, that they had little ownership, and they really wanted to implement their ways of working, but they felt the system was making them do things in a particular way. And all this kind of led to them not really having a very positive relationship with the CMS. So this got me thinking, like, another way. We had an opportunity with this upgrade to do things differently. And this is, I guess, what I mean by reimagining the CMS into something that editors have got some influence in shaping themselves. So instead of us just building it for them, could we let go of some of that power a bit and build it with them, and in the process move it from something that they felt was restricting them to something that was actually more empowering? And I know this was a dream, I guess, and a long game, a stretch goal. But my idea was like something like this, taking that earlier model. So instead of just the text and images and video going in and spitting out web pages at the other end, we'd have something where there was input from editors in the form of ideas and approaches and mechanisms, and that could kind of feed into workflows and layouts in a kind of ongoing iterative process. And I guess my idea for this was partly inspired by reading about co-design, and in particular some of the ideas from K.A. McKercher's book, Beyond Sticky Notes. And they outline these 6 mindsets for co-design, including elevating lived experience, curiosity, hospitality, learning through doing. And thinking about these ideas and thinking of them in the context of a CMS made me think, can we build a CMS that's less like a system, but more as a kind of partnership where editors are bringing their expertise, presenting their needs, and the CMS is meeting them to support them in those needs and enabling them to do their best work and exert their expertise. And I guess this is like to borrow a concept from the service literature to see value being co-created from the CMS. But this was theory, and I knew this was a long game. But one of the things I took from the co-design reading that I did was that before you can even start to get into this, you really need a deep understanding of the people that you're designing for and with, and understanding the editor perspective. So that was the first stage of the process. And here are some of the ways that I got to know editors. So I used a practical empathy approach, with the emphasis really on building relationships and not just scoping requirements. To start with, I needed a way to surface what really mattered to the community of editors en masse, because there were hundreds of them. And I used Jerry McGovern's top task method for this, which is basically a simple survey that you can send out to a community of people who use a system or service that you've produced. And the survey lists all the tasks that you can complete using the system, and it asks those people to pick which of their top 5 that are most important. And the results from that survey gave me an idea of like what were the priorities, and I could then follow that up with individual sessions with individual people to actively listen to them and observe them using the CMS sort of screenshot by screenshot to see how it fitted into their workflows of publishing, and crucially to see where they left the CMS to do stuff outside and where those hacks and workarounds were being done. And also on this sort of along the spectrum of relationship building, I was conscious of making sure there were channels for them to get in touch with me. So it wasn't a one-way process. I wanted to make sure we were being transparent about the work we were doing, upgrading the CMS. So sharing early prototypes, ideas, and encouraging them, setting up playground sites to give them an opportunity to experiment with it and feed that back. And it's fair to say when I began this process, building relationships with editors, I felt pretty overwhelmed. Many of them had worked with the CMS for years, and they were straight up asking for solutions and features in the upgrade. And of course, carousels was one of them. Everybody always asked for carousels. Different button styles was another thing people were asking. And to give you some context, we already have around 60 different styles of a button available. But people were asking for more. And at this point, it was important for me to take that information on board, but not to jump to the solutions. It would have been super easy to go straight to my Jira board and add in these requests for new features, but I wanted to stay focused on surfacing the underlying needs. So what do I mean by that? Well, apologies for the text on this. It's quite small and blurry, but I'm going to zoom in on my next slide so you'll be able to read it a bit more. But this is kind of a snapshot of my process that I went through to understand those needs, those workflows, and the mental models that editors were using to complete their tasks. So this picture shows a screenshot of a larger Miro board that I used to really lay out the tasks involved. The editors went through creating a page about a course on our website. That's one of the very common pages that you would find on our website. And the yellow post-it notes that you can see on the sort of top portion of the picture capture all the stages I saw editors go through to result in that page about a course. And the bottom portion is the pink post-it notes. Those were capturing the underlying needs that I extrapolated. So listening to them, watching why they were doing things and working out why they were doing things a particular way. So I'm going to zoom in on this part. So yeah, this is how an editor would typically go about, pulled out a couple of stages of creating that new page about a course. So they'd start and they'd go, I'll find an existing page, clone it. They then have some text prepared for their new page somewhere else that they would then copy and paste in. They typically look at that page before publishing it, think it was too long, and think about how can I shorten it. And they would typically turn to accordions to add in accordion sections and chunk it to make it give the appearance of a shorter page. And then they then think, once the page was published, how do I get people to look at this page? And they'd start thinking about surrounding pages to add links and buttons to direct people to it. So why were they going about it that way? Well, that's what I learned really from kind of deep listening. So their reason for, and here's some of the things I've learned in these pink stickies. The reason to start by cloning an existing page was essentially to avoid starting with a blank page, because nobody likes a blank page. It's quite hard to deal with a blank page. We as humans like some structure, and we like something to be able to edit rather than having a blank canvas sometimes. And this was certainly something we saw with the editors. They wanted something to adapt, a way to guide them in. So the underlying need really was a way to help them to structure their content. The copy and pasting thing, that indicated the need that they wanted to prepare and finalize the text, and they were a bit scared to do that within the actual CMS in case they made a mistake. So they typically did this outside the CMS in a spreadsheet or a document. The accordions usage was there because it was available. Basically, what they really needed was a way to make longer pages more navigable, to get people to the content that they required on those pages, and they saw accordions as a way to do that. And the adding links afterwards really signified an underlying need to be able to connect related pieces of content together. So taking all this information in, again, trying not to move into solutions too quickly, I identified that there were kind of three buckets, types of solutions that we could implement to address some of these underlying needs. There were clearly features that we could build. We were configuring the CMS. We could add those features in. That would be one way to support their needs. But thinking about the broader picture, Drupal, it's an open source content management system. It has a huge community of development expertise behind it, and it has done for years. So it was likely that the solutions we were looking for that could help our editors were out there in the Drupal community. They would have been tried and tested, or there'd be feedback about them, and that would save our team maybe reinventing the wheel. But there was also another set of solutions in the form of like empowerment mechanisms to give those editors what they needed to make the most of the CMS, to kind of open it out to them. and make it work for them rather than the other way around. So paying careful attention to activities like onboarding, familiarization, peer support, and the use of mechanisms like choice architecture, thinking about the way that parts of functionality were presented to them in the interface of the CMS, would also support them in the completion of their tasks. And here's where I want to bring in a bit of behavioral science, because when it came to selecting the right solutions for the CMS to meet those needs, whichever you select, they're going to involve decisions around, will the editor change their behavior? Will they move towards a different way of working? Will they shift their mental models? And a lot of the time, the answer to that is no. You know, we as humans don't typically change our behaviors unless we're given the capability, opportunity, and motivation to do so, as the Combi model outlines. So editors, for example, might avoid cloning the pages if they knew there was a different way, if they knew that they could pick a really good content type that would guide them to structuring content instead. And if the opportunity for that content type was presented to them at the point where they were about to do that piece of work, they might also choose that option if they knew other editors were doing it. So if they knew that there was some motivation from their peers to help them work in that way. So appreciating knowledge of this way that humans behave and appreciating those toolkits of solutions can complement each other, really help to kind of think about the best, most sustainable solutions for developing our CMS. So, you know, thinking back to that editor in the place of creating a page about a course, wanting the content to have a structure, the page to be navigable and to have related content mechanisms. CMS could be configured with content types to structure the content. There could be tags enabled to facilitate sharing. This is all doable with standard Drupal functionality like views and taxonomies. And to complement all this, empowering editors with clear knowledge of content strategy for their site, and to have those choices presented to them clearly, it could help to see whether the solutions became joined up so that they'd have more opportunity to really support the editors and what they were doing. So adopting this sort of needs-focused approach helps us to shape our CMS from the editor perspective and keep the editors in mind when it came to some of the project management tools we were using, like our Jira boards, for example. So we were ensuring that we had editor-focused user stories in the backlog of the tasks for our project team to complete, and that we were adding new features and functionality with a clear user need attached to them. And this talk was delivered back in 2022. And at the time I didn't have parts of the interface to showcase. Really had very little to show. This was a long process, but we do now. And so I need to update this talk with some examples of what we did do, but that's another part of the story.
We can perhaps weave a blog post or something, and you can perhaps be convinced or persuaded. Share a screenshot or something.
I have some videos that I can share after this, actually, if that would be of interest, because I developed them for that reason. I'm conscious of leaving some time for questions. I've got a few reflections on our process, so I can go through those, or I can take questions now, whatever you would like.
Cool. I think if you go on the reflections, I think that's the next slide.
Yeah, I have a few more slides. So
on the comments that people would like to see your the screens, but we'll do that. I'll put that into the blog post, and you and I can go back and forth on that. But I think on the perhaps the summary slide, if you go to that, or the reflections, we can take 1 or 2 minutes on those, and then just open it up for Q&A. Yeah, that's fine, Emma. We'll leave some time for.
I'll go straight to questions then, and then I can always come. The reflections are probably going to come out in the questions, I think. So
if you don't mind just going back one slide, we can leave that pending, and then we can take any question people might have. And I think I see that Debbie figured out to use the raise hands function. So I'm going to call on you first, Debbie.
Thanks very much. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really love the focus on really kind of empowering the editors and really working with their processes and what they're trying to achieve. I think that's really great. I'm really curious to ask though, seeing as you kind of did this work, I'm assuming in 2022, and we've seen a lot of like technology-driven changes over the last year. Um, are you seeing that any of these kinds of technological drivers are actually changing that flow that you've kind of been working with iteratively with your team?
To be honest, no, not really. The way that people would tend to, our website and university website is very text heavy, and quite information heavy. So the information that would tend to go out on the pages would be kind of similar. And what people are looking for is like it comes down to sort of standard content design processes, things that what people are really, I guess, things that are changing is our editors being more in tune with their audiences and realizing that less is more, and that it is worth spending time crafting words, because essentially that's what a lot of the audiences, whatever those audiences might be, are looking for. It's the words that they're interested in. So we're not seeing, there have obviously been technological developments, but an appreciation of good content practices, I think, is still there in what our editors are trying to do.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, very good. And then let's jump to the US. Mark?
Thanks, Jonas. Emma, I was curious about your editors. You mentioned there was about 300 editors using the CMS. Did you find that you were able to treat them all as one group, or were there factions or subsets within the editor group based on, were you able to use just one persona, or did you need more than one to address the needs of your editors?
It's a really good question. And what I tended to do, instead of focus on the persona led, it was more about the task. So I would really try and surface like what are the common pages that people are wanting to create, and what are the workflows, because that's where I was finding the commonality, and that's where people wanted to learn from other editors, for example. So some would have really good workflows that were quite efficient and streamlined about how they came from receiving information about a course, which was quite dense and very academic heavy, and then turning that into something that was suitable for a web page. So surfacing those commonalities across the publishing community was how I tried to approach that, rather than like create a persona, or multiple personas. I try to just focus on the priority tasks, which is where, and that was kind of led by the Jerry McGovern top tasks survey, trying to surface like what do you spend the most time on what's most important to you about your website to get right, was how I tried to guide that.
Great. And then we'll move to the University of Copenhagen. Johannes?
Hi, I'm Johannes from University of Copenhagen. It's a great presentation. It's a very familiar problems, I think. I wanted to ask you, how's the relationship with a sort of a content strategy, or the higher defined goals of the website, and not just the editor's requests for wanting this? Is it part of this too?
It is a huge part of it, and that's kind of where I started to realize that the tech can only do so much and the CMS can only do so much. There needs to be an understanding of the goals of websites. And at the time when I did this work, I didn't have a team really as a user experience manager. But since then, I have recruited people into my team. And one of the things that we're working on now is having workshops with groups of editors to help them understand business needs versus user needs, and then to weave that into, I sometimes find that talking about content strategy can frighten some of our editors. They feel like it's another big piece of work that they need to get. But I mean, essentially, a strategy is just a plan, right? So a piece of work I'm involved in now is to try and make that an accessible thing, so that editors just kind of, before they publish a page, they start and think, like, who's it for? What do I want to achieve from it? To kind of make sure that they're making best use of their time. But that is an ongoing process, and I'm pleased to say I've got more resource in my team now, so that I can focus on that and do a better job of it than I was in 2022.
Great. And then Martin also raised his hand.
Thank you. I have a maybe odd question, but I am very interested. How did you arrive to the decision to go for sort of editing experience opportunity rather than anything else, especially when, as you said, there might be plugins that are solving the issue already?
So I think this came down to really the relationship building, and understanding that we as a university, one of our greatest assets is the staff we have and the knowledge they have. It's what brings people to our university. And I was listening to these people and understanding their areas of expertise. I was really keen to try and harness this with the website and make them understand that, the website could do a lot more for them than it was doing. So rather than try and, I guess, obviously we want to make this more streamlined and aligned to their needs, but I didn't want to kind of dumb down or the process of creating content for websites, because it is a specialist skill and it's worth learning. And I think that was the message I really wanted to get across, rather than try and find technical solutions and make promises that I couldn't be 100% sure that I could deliver on, I guess, with the tech and plugins, because a plugin might work for one person, it might not for another. So I was aware that, there's disparate ranges of skills and understanding across the community.
Great. So before we get in overtime, I would say thank you very much, Emma. Really appreciate it. Perhaps as a final challenge, if you can go back to your slide 5, which was the one with editors and the CMS, where you have CMS in the middle. It reminded me, and this is becoming sometimes
this one.
Yeah, it's perfect. It reminded me of a blog post that good old Dean Barker wrote back in 2006 with the first 85%. I'm sharing the link on the chat shortly. But he's basically making the point that most of content management doesn't happen in the CMS. It's the last 15%, because it's produced in Word and copy pasted, like you've also said. And so it's interesting to see this illustration, and just wondering to hear if the percentage might be lower, higher today at the university.
I think that's probably pretty accurate, the 85%, based on what I've seen. Yeah, a lot of that work crafting the content seems to happen outside, and then it's like the CMS is delivering the final part. But I think it can shift. I mean, there's a lot, even in the course of a year, having attended DrupalCon this year versus last year, there's a lot more functionality to try and flip that and encourage people to spend more time in the CMS and understand that it can be used for some of those content preparation paths. So yeah, it'd be interesting to read that article and then revisit it based on my experiences of this.
Great. We made it just on time. Thank you so much for giving us a talk from a year ago. You remembered it quite well, I'll say.